Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. As promised last week, it's time for us to come back with an update about the latest news of cyclocross riders racing on the road, a couple of updates on the cyclocross calendar, as well as some mountain bike news regarding Puk Pieterse. With me here to discuss all of that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's good for me to get out of my thesis work as well. I'm writing my bachelor thesis now, so it's nice to vent some thoughts on the more fun stuff in life, bike racing. So, let's get straight into it. Issam, on the road, let's start with the news of the day. Capablanca Vash SD Works in the red jersey of the Vuelta Femina. And she did so after she sprinted to a second place in today's stage. It was the first real stage. Yesterday was the TTT, in which SD Works ended third at 1 second from winner's trek. A very messy final today, loads of crashes, lots of sprinters held up. But Vash, not quite able to take the win. She is also not the fastest pure sprinter. But super nice to see her in the red jersey, of course.
Totally, and I think it's a bit like last year where she also was sprinting up there in the Vuelta. And I think for her it's definitely a big bonus. And you can, she probably knows that it's not going to be for the general classification. They have following, so that is definitely the one that is going to try to go for the overall. But it's obviously nice to have that jersey on, and I think for her it's just now a question of enjoy and try to maybe win a stage in it in that jersey. But it's for her for now. It's already a big positives, and a bit of a shame that she was not able to win the stage. But if you win the jersey, that's also a great bonus.
Yeah, she won't be the GC leader there with following on the team, but it's good to see her do well. We've had our doubts about the connection there at SD Works. I'm still always going to be a bit skeptical of that move. Just not really sure what their long-term plans are. We do know that Vash is targeting the Olympics on the mountain bike this summer, so that will be interesting to see how she does there, because of course in Tokyo 2021, 3 years ago, kind of out of the blue, she ended fourth. I remember I predicted her for a 10th place as I wasn't really joking about it, but I was also I just put Vash in my prediction. Well, we'll just see. Maybe I can score some points. I like Vash. Let's see what comes from it. But then fourth was a tremendous surprise there. So let's see what she can do. She's known to be a very good peaker. So I'm really looking forward to that. I do think she will need to do some mountain bike races leading up to that event, because we saw last year at the World Championships in Glasgow that just hopping on cold, she did in the U23 race, was not a massive success. Something that was a success, I don't think if we can call it massive, but Thibaut Nys started his road season in Tour de Romandie. He's not going to be racing the Giro, but the expectations were high for the prologue. Oh, can he win? He couldn't quite win. It was a very technical prologue. Second stage, can he sprint to victory? No. But then in the third stage, he went in the break, mountain top finish. He was eventually up there on the final climb with Andrea Vendrame from AG Desert Decathlon and Xandra Meurissen from Alpecin. He kept going. Nys and Vendrame were up front, were caught by Luc Plapp. And then it came down to a sprint, which Nys won, first World Tour victory there. Also an impressive ride by the young Belgian Issam.
Yeah, it's a great debut for him, and I think that for sure it was. The expectations were somewhat high, but I feel also a little bit unrealistic. It was for him. I felt that this was kind of a race for him where he can try things out and get a feeling for racing back in the peloton, but not really. For me, it wasn't really necessary for him to win a stage or something, but I guess it was very nice for him to do it that way. Difficult stage, and he was able to hold his own and able to endure that stage quite well, and then eventually used his weapon in a way, which was his sprint, and I think that overall it looked really good. So it's he showed that he has potential on the road for sure, and he has already done that several times also in the junior categories and the youth categories. So I feel that his approach at the moment is kind of the right one. It's very cautious, but it's, just taking it bit by bit and slowly but surely trying to make the bigger moves. And I feel that is the right way for him to do. But at the moment he needs to kind of find his, the things that really suit him well, because as you said, there was a lot of talks about that very short time trial that he could, maybe win that because of being the cyclocrosser in that. But it's just for him, I think he needs to find the things where he's good at and pick his moments. And that is, at this age, that's the right thing to do. You need to just try and find what suits your best. And I think that journey is probably for this year, and maybe next year he can try to try and do better in the somewhat bigger races, and we will see what that will be, because I think with the team he's at right now with Little Track, I think that is, you cannot ask for a better team, in my opinion. That's a great team that takes care of the rider, and I feel that he can do great things there.
Yeah, I think he's in a good place at Trek, but I'm interested to see what type of rider he will exactly become. As you say, he's still young, he has time to explore. Time trialing does not seem to be what he excels at, but of course he's always going to be compared with Van Aert and Van der Poel, and I think we should stop doing that, because he's a different type of rider to me. If you look at Nijs, he's leaner, he's more rank, as we say in Dutch. He doesn't have the big muscles, he's not as muscular, he's more... It looks more elegant when he's riding a bike. He's just a different type of rider. Sven van Toerenhout, of course, the Belgian media will always be the Belgian media, and Sven van Toerenhout was persuaded to make an interesting quote about Nijs after that win, saying that he climbs better than Joubert at that age, so he could become the new Joubert. I think that's very big shoes to fill. Nijs seems to me a rider for the Ardennes Classics. Joubert was a bit more versatile, also won Paris-Roubaix towards the end of his career, but Nijs, on the other hand, he seems to be a guy good for the Amstel Gold Race, good for Flèche Wallonne, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, if he can do well there. Perhaps the Tour of Flanders with how climbing heavy that's become in recent years. Then in Grand Tours, I think a stage hunter. If there's a short uphill finish, 1, 2, 3 kilometers, he's not the Peter Sagan, Michael Matthews type of, I can survive a number of hills and then sprint on the flat. He doesn't seem to have that top speed, doesn't seem to have the body for that either. But like Muur de Huy at the end of a stage, or less steep, something like that seems to be what he can do well at. So it will be interesting to see when he will develop further on the road. They're being pretty cautious with him, which I do like. But for sure, someday we'll see him in the Ardennes Classics, and that's the perfect bridge for us to talk about those Ardennes Classics. They're some time behind us now, so it can be pretty short, but still needs to be mentioned. Mathieu van der Poel, raced Amstel Gold Race, didn't have a good day, was very passive in his racing style, waited a lot, eventually didn't feature for top 10 place. Then rested for a week, did training in Spain, and then prepared for Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Was held up by a crash, long chase, came back, got dropped on Redoute, came back, got dropped on the Rochelle-Faucon, came back, sprinted to third. A win was never really on the cards against Tadej Pogačar. It was just too hard, but with the final here, Rochelle-Faucon, then the false flat, then the downhill, and then the part to Liège, you can see riders like Van der Poel. We've seen Van Aert do it before, we've seen Quinten Hermans do it before. They get dropped on the Rochelle-Faucon, but just because it's difficult for a group to work together well enough when they're not racing for the win, or even if they would be racing for the win, you can come back, and that's what happened for Van der Poel. He kept going all day and never gave up. That resilience should be applauded, and third place is a really good finish for him to a very strong Classics campaign.
Yeah, and to find the motivation as well after the season that he has been having so far already. I mean, that is also something that should be applauded in a way. But as you said, I think the win was not on the card very early on, and overall it wasn't really on the cards the way how the race played out. And I feel that despite that, there is still a lot of positives for him to take, because he was still able to get back to the riders, to the bigger group in a way, and he maintained his position quite well and was able to capitalize during the climbs to get back to the groups, and I think that is definitely, that is for him most likely the way he should be riding this race. But the question is now going to be, how about the next coming years? How will he do his spring classic season? Because I don't know if he's going to be able, and if he's willing to extend his season all the way to Liège-Bastogne-Liège. I don't know if that is something that is up in the cards, but overall I feel that it was an okay attempt and an overall great result to finish on the podium, and it's kind of the cherry on the cake.
Van der Poel has defied a lot of laws of cycling, laws of logic, perhaps even some laws of gravity throughout his cycling career, but common sense prevailed in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. It would be insane if Van der Poel, seen his weight, could follow Pogačar there, who is such a good rider on those type of courses. So if he were to win Liège, he would need to hope that Pogačar doesn't come, that Evenepoel doesn't come, because if those riders are there, it's going to be very, very hard for him. He said, well, it's some thought, a reason for thought when he's now in Dubai, but I don't know. At the end of the day, it will be his decision, but to me, it would seem pretty silly to sacrifice a few more years of chances, very good chances even, of winning Tour Flanders, Milan-San Remo, Paris-Roubaix. Those races, you can win them. Why would you give it up for a potential win in Liège? At the end of the day, only he can decide what he values more, a fourth Tour Flanders win, third Paris-Roubaix win, or a first Liège win. That's up to him. Somebody who had a similar race to Van der Poel, apart from the early chase from the crash, was Marianne Vos. Also had a very good Amstel Gold race, took the win there. But only after Wiebes celebrated too early, jumped her on the line, took the win there, took the week off, finished her season in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. She got dropped on the Rochelle-Faucon, but she did look very good on the Redoute. Then in the end, wasn't quite able to come back to a bigger leading group, which was ahead in the women's race, and then won the sprint of the second group, just like Van der Poel did. But for Vos, that was a 7th place. I think Vos can also look back on a pretty good Spring Classic campaign. Sure, it lacks the big win. She didn't win Paris-Roubaix. That's the race she really should have won. She also said it herself, that one really hurt. But at the same time, take a bow, take your hat off, take your cap off. Marianne Vos, if your career is that long, I mean, how long has Vos been racing? Like 18 years in her career now, I think, maybe even longer, maybe 20 years of racing. It's so long, I don't even know the exact number. If you're still capable of performing at this level, at that age, that really is something special.
Absolutely, and I think that it was, if you look at how her spring season went, it was a very good one. It just, as you said, it lacked that very big win, and I guess that big win was definitely Paris-Roubaix. That could have been the one, and eventually it wasn't really the case. And yeah, I don't know how many chances he will still get to try and win it, but it was definitely great to see her back again at the front, racing. And I think it is also for her much more enjoyable, the way she's now able to kind of race more at the front than what we had before. And I feel that is definitely, great to see. And every year is, for us, I would say, a bonus, because as you said, she's already in the game for quite a while. And it's just, hopefully we can see her again next year, and it will be interesting to see, how the next Paris-Roubaix will play off. And it wouldn't surprise me if she wins it next year, that she would call it a day, because you can see in a way that it's also, we are nearing an end of an era for her. But it's, I think that Paris-Roubaix is definitely a race that she really wants to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how it will play out, her career overall. But I think that these last couple of seasons are definitely not going to defy her overall career. It was, if you look back at all the achievements that she had, is incredible, insane, and legendary in a way. So it's just what we get right now is just a bonus, and the palmarès that she has already is already there, and it's not gonna change much with the races that she's doing at the moment.
Vos decides when Vos retires. I mean, it says something that we're talking about a soon-to-be 37 rider, and we're saying that big win is missing. When she won Omloop het Nieuwsblad, she won Dwars door Vlaanderen, she won the Amstel Gold Race. Despite her age, we're still talking about Vos. It's not that we say her campaign is a failure, but it misses that cherry on the top of especially Paris-Roubaix, a race we know she's been targeting. But I just did the research. It's 20 years since she won the Junior Women's World title as a first year. She's had 18 in her 18th season as a pro, at least if my quick maths are correct here. But that tells you something, and it's really, really good. She's now, I think, trying to mentor Fem van Empel into a role. Van Empel herself had a pretty good showing in Flèche Wallonne. It was a very hard race, very bad weather conditions, but Van Empel was up there. She made the split ahead of the Muur de Huy for the final time. Then up that climb, she rode to an 8th place. Personally, I'm not really surprised by an 8th place for Van Empel. I think these are the type of races where she should perform. It's good to see her finally get a result in one of the bigger races. I'm more surprised by her comments after, because Van Empel said this was a tremendous surprise. I don't know what this means for the future. Her team was acting like it was a surprise. But at the same time, the team Issam has been telling us, Van Empel is going to be our leader in a bunch of races. She should be ready to compete for podiums, maybe victories, for sure a lot of top 10s. And then when she gets one, they act like it's a super underdog story, a surprise. Bit confusing to me, because if I look at the rider Van Empel is, power profile wise, riding style wise, Flèche Wallonne, Amstel Gold Race, the non-cobbled climbing stuff, that's where I associate Van Empel with. Flèche Wallonne, good effort. Think it's perfect-ish for her, seeing where she excels at in cyclocross in terms of power efforts. I'm not really surprised by an 8th place there.
No, me neither. And I think, the comments of Van Empel after a race are not always have to be taken seriously, because, in cyclocross we have had certain comments that... winning a race and then say that it wasn't really her best day, and before the race, I don't really feel well, and then she dominates the race by 2 minutes. So, it's sometimes she kind of underplays the performance. I think she's just happy that she was able to have a good result. And look, as we said before the spring season, that for me personally, these are the results that should have been there, maybe even already last year. But anyways, we are this year we are having these results, and hopefully in the next coming years we are going to have a Van Empel that is going to get more used to the racing and the way you have to position yourself in crucial moments. And also, I think then it's going to be a matter of time before we are going to see her on the podium and even win races, in my opinion. But time will tell, and that is eventually what we are going to have to wait for, if she's going to be able to make that step and battle for podiums, top 5s, and even victories.
She will need more experience, because in the Amstel Gold Race she was in the leading group going towards the final time Kouberg. She was way out of position. 3 Visma Lab riders made it into the first group after the climb. Van Empel was not one of them, and she should definitely see the fact that she didn't work before be in that group. That Amstel was also interesting because we did see Jara Kastelein feature at the front of the race. Kastelein not really able to live up to the expectations she set a few seasons ago, when she was on the verge of getting a top 10 in the Tour of Flanders, but then crashed. It's also not been bad, but she seemed to change more into a climber / stage hunter rather than a rider to really be reckoned with. In that Amstel Gold Race in the break, she was the worst out of the 3 leaders, but it was still nice to see her at the front of the race. She then also made it across the Kouberg, so definitely props to her. And Van Empel, that was just disappointing. But later on the day in the men's race, Issam, we had Pidcock taking the win there. That was, really a boost for Pidcock, who had, well, I wouldn't really say a hard time, but the expectation pattern around Pidcock was so high that it felt like he was disappointing, even though he didn't really do that bad, because he's just combining everything.
Yeah, I feel that he's sometimes a little harsh on himself. Also kind of understandable, because he has that potential, and every time we see him at a race, we're like, okay, he needs to, we expect this from him, or we expect that from him, and I feel that's how we just approach his position when he's going to be racing. We just expect a lot from him, and I think that he expects a lot from himself as well. I'm happy for him that he was able to win the Amstel Gold Race. It felt that it was something that he really was pursuing in a way. Bit of a shame the way his Liège-Bastogne-Liège race went. I think that he maybe put even more effort into that chase than Van der Poel did, and that arguably could have cost him in the end of the race. But I think overall that for him, the amount of goals that he has, I'm getting a little worried in a way how he's going to deal with that. I don't know if that ambition that he has for the Tour de France is something that he should really be taking. It's a very ambitious goal that he has, and I think that I wouldn't say that it's something that unachievable, but it feels almost like that, and I don't know, it feels like it's too many objectives on his shoulders, and we have to wait and see how that will play out. But for sure, if you look at his mountain bike potential, it's totally there, and on the road he's able to do his things, and if everything falls on his place, he's probably able to win in all three disciplines. So it's crazy the ability that he has. But it's going to be interesting how his rest of the season will go, with aiming for a general classification in the Tour de France and the Olympics, where he's going to try to do the mountain bike there. So it will be proper interesting, and I'm definitely going to cheer for him.
I don't know. I can still see a Grand Tour GC work for Pidcock. I don't necessarily think he is of the caliber to beat Pogačar, Evenepoel. He hasn't shown enough for that, but a GC, a top 10 in the Tour, maybe in the future a top 5, I can see it happen. We shouldn't forget that last year he crashed pretty badly, which affected him in the final week. He's just had quite a bit of bad luck, and Pidcock is this type of rider, because the expectation pattern is so high, it's very easy to think, oh, he's just been underwhelming. But if you look at his actual results, they're not that bad. I mean, last year he ended second in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. That's a monument podium. Sure, in the Tour in that third week, things didn't go well for him after that crash. That's life, unfortunately. But he has not been horrible as the way it's been portrayed. Last year, he took that win in Strade Bianche. I think he was also on the podium of the Amstel Gold Race. This year, he won the Amstel Gold Race. As you said, spent a lot of energy in Liège-Bastogne-Liège in that chase, which I don't really want to go into too much since we're not a road podcast, but some dodgy stuff went on there with the team cars and the way that everything was handled there. But he is consistently up there. If we then also factor in the fact that he does very well on the mountain bike, there is a reason he is the mountain bike world champion. That's also special. We can't just pretend like, oh well, yeah, it's just the mountain bike world title. The hopping from bike to bike is something that costs a lot of energy, which is difficult. So I think that partly because of the self-proclaimed expectation pattern around Pidcock, they've been overly harsh on him, and that's why I will also be cheering for him. I hope he wins that Olympic gold medal. I think he has a better shot at it than Mathieu van der Poel. But yeah, I think definitely you still have a point about the number of objectives. Should you be targeting a GC in the Tour de France when you also want to win the Olympic mountain bike title a few weeks later? I'm not too sure about that one, but we'll see how it pans out. Maybe it's just a story and he just goes to the Tour to prepare, does a bit of work for Rodriguez. Don't know how Bernal will be there, so we'll see what comes from it, but I don't think it should be taking all too long before we see Pidcock hop on that mountain bike, although we have no news on that so far. Then, of course, more cyclocross riders have been racing on the road. Venturelli, Persico, they've been ripping up some of those Italian smaller races, one-day stage races. What else did we see? The juniors, Kat Ferguson continuing to dominate, won the 3 days of Borsele. Really blistering TT there by her. So, yeah, they've been doing well, but that's not only on the road, because we've also seen a couple of good mountain biking results. The World Cup has started in Brazil. We had the first round take place in Mariapora and the second round take place in Araxa. Issam, you know I am a big fan of the Brazilian World Cups. You know that I love the racing there, the spectators. I am really a big fan. But I was a bit surprised when I saw Valentina Corvi on the podium there. I think she is a first year U23 from the top of my head. Yeah, she should be a first year U23, 2005. Might be second. No, she should be a first year. But I always get confused because the way the categories worked in cross, that you switch early. But yeah, she is a first year. Really good result by her. There were, I think, some interesting results around the board. Simon Andreasen winning cross-country race there. Christoph Blevins also winning in Mariapora. But at the same time, some early season, we saw it the last time we went to Brazil. We see it every year when we start the racing. Season planning is key. The best mountain bike riders in the world on the women's side were all not there. Peterson not there, going to start her season soon. Prévost, best rider so far, not there. Mittenwalner, not there either. Different levels of peaking. Some riders, the Americans, forced to peak early in the season because they want to secure that Olympic starting spot. You have Risvets, on the other hand, after winning in Brazil, saying, I'm not peaking. Why would I? I'm already qualified for the Olympics. I only want to be good there. So it's very hard to place these results on a scale which will tell us anything before we head to Paris this summer.
Oh, totally. And I think especially with an Olympic year, you're going to see some riders nowhere at certain races. And then when we slowly start to get closer and closer to that date where they're going to be starting in Paris, close to Paris actually, then you're going to see some riders having miraculously better form. So it is, that is kind of how it goes, and you cannot really blame them, because for many of these athletes, the Olympic Games is probably the most important race in their career, and it only comes once every 4 years. So then, there is extra pressure on it for the French riders, even more, I would say, because, home country, do not really get that opportunity that often. A lot of riders have a lot of things on their mind, and some are not really focusing on the racing that they are doing at that moment, and others are trying to get through it. And as you said, the Americans, which you have to explain it a little bit more to me, because I heard something about it, but how does it really work, the qualifying? Because it sounds kind of, I wouldn't say stupid, but it doesn't sound like the smartest thing for the riders to be peaking so early on in the season.
Well, I'll explain how it works. So, first of all, let me start by stating that in mountain bike, because of how stretched the season is, you always see the different seasonal approaches. You see some riders targeting the World Cup, so they need to be good in the beginning to secure the points. Others, like we saw last year with Prévost, really only peak for the World Championships, or sometimes they do 2 peaks. This year it's even more complicated because we're in an Olympic season. The start quota for the Olympics are severely limited. They're super limited. Each country has 2 or 1 spots. So that's not that much. And here's then where the difference comes. On one hand, you have riders like Risvets, who won, but said, well, I'm not peaking for these races. I don't need to be in good form here. I want to be decent, want to test myself a bit, but Paris, that's what matters for me. I have no stress. Risvets races for Sweden. Sweden has one good mountain bike rider, and it's Johnny Risvets. So she knows the federation is going to put my name in for the one spot Sweden has. That's no worry for her. On the other hand, you have nations where the competition is more fierce. Switzerland, France, but also America, the USA. especially on the women's side there, they have 4 riders competing for 2 spots. 4 riders all capable of riding in the top 10. We've seen that last year at the World Championships. They had 2, did well this weekend. But because those countries have an internal battle going on for the Olympics, they are requiring their riders to be in form earlier in the season. So each federation sets a cutoff date. Okay, best results before XYZ. We'll take these riders. They don't want to use the results from previous year, because if it's so competitive, it's basically worthless. If you remember back to Pidcock, when he raced the Tokyo Olympics, the season before, 2020, he wasn't even really racing with the pros, so he didn't have a head-to-head comparison. You don't really want to depend on those results, because especially if it's so close, things can change. Every country has different set of standards, different cutoff dates, etc. Let's not go into that, but there are definitely reasons why certain countries are having their riders be in form earlier than others. Is that ideal? No, probably not. But at the same time, it's also something that's not uncommon if we look across different sports. In speed skating in the Netherlands, you have the Olympic qualification tournament a month and a half before the Winter Olympics. Only the best speed skaters go, so you'll need to be in a very good form already there. This format also exists in the US, and you'll probably know it from athletics, where you have like the Olympic trials, where if a country has too many athletes who have run a limit, that they'll have a shootout event or something like that to determine who gets to go. So it's not ideal, but also not exactly uncommon.
Yeah, okay. I was familiar with it, but I wasn't familiar with exactly why, in the beginning, the first 2 races were that important. But it clears it up for me. So that's one thing. But yeah, it's again that's exactly kind of how weird an Olympic year kind of is, because there are every single rider kind of has a different mindset compared to how it would be if you would say compared to last year, where you would be like, okay, I want to try to be as good as possible for the majority of the races, and I want to maybe win the World Cup, or I want to win a World Cup race, or I want to win in my home country or something like that. And that is totally different right now, because it's now you're some are solely focused on the Olympics, and others are trying to snatch a victory left or right, and that makes it very exciting. So I think, we're up for some great racing in the next coming months that are coming up.
I think it's also important to note that on the women's side, the 3 best riders in the world weren't there. Puk Pieterse, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, and Mona Mietenwalner. Although, okay, maybe we should say Johanna Lecomte is part of that group as well, but that's another discussion. We're going to see those face off head-to-head soon when the Mountain Bike World Cup comes to Europe. Pieterse is going to be starting her season fairly soon as well. She's starting this weekend with the 3 Nations Cup in Belgium, and then she's going to be racing the European Championships in Romania, where she's hoping to defend her title. Then some cyclocross news. We're getting slowly but surely a better understanding of the calendar. Last week we ranted and vented our thoughts about the Cyclocross World Cup. Now, Issam, we have a bit of news regarding the early Belgian races. Traditionally, the cross season always started in September. The times of Valence and Nice sometimes even late in August, or there were some summer cross races. I remember a summer cross race around the circuit of Zolder. But really in recent years we had September with 3 exact cross races, and then in October, we rolled into Super Prestige before going to the US. But last year, due to circumstances, at least that's how it was explained then, it looked like we were going to start in October, which we did with only Beringen. Then we went to Waterloo, then we came back, and the cross season got underway with the Super Prestige in Overijse. This year, it looks like we're heading for a repeat of some, because Kruijbeke, they are saying their course still isn't ready because of ongoing roadworks on their start-finish straight. But Lokeren, a race that usually was the opener, they've organized the Belgian Championships, and they've had a taste of how it is to have a big crowd there, and they say, well, we want to organize a cross. but not in September. We want to be somewhere where we have an increased chance of Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, lots of spectators. So also factoring the fact that Molenbeek organized the Belgian Championships and therefore is uncertain if they will be back on the calendar. It looks like we're heading for another October start of the cyclocross season in Belgium, which is likely to be a week after the Gravel World Championship, so second week of October.
If I may predict, I think that it is something that we can expect for the coming years in a way, at least for the foreseeable future. And it is, I don't know how to look at it, because in a way, obviously, we kind of have, the first races of the year. We always say that it doesn't really matter that much. It's basically, the riders are there and they're trying to find some form, but it's not really anything telling, and the races are not that important because it's basically Cyclocross races, so it doesn't really matter that much. It's nice if you have a victory, but we forget about that in a week, kind of how it goes. So I feel that in that regard, the races do not matter that much, but it's also kind of worrying because now we, as you said, Lokeren now wants to get closer to the December month in a way, and it's worrying in the sense that we're not going to have a lot of place anymore in those in both November, December, January. There's not going to be a lot of place for these races, and which could result eventually in some races that have to eventually stop because they're not able to get a good date. And I don't know how to look at that. I have to see how it's going to play out, because then we kind of know where it's heading towards. But at the moment it feels as if we might see some races just quit, and maybe some races try to find a position that suits them a little better. And who knows what's going to come out of that, and we'll have to wait and see. But I am personally not really the most positive about what's going on at the moment.
Well, that's a change from last week, but yeah, is it a big loss in terms of the results? Do we care about the results of those races? No. But it's still important that those races exist, because riders need to do a number of races to get into a certain rhythm before the cross season properly gets underway. If we look at the races that were in the early season, there was always a lack of interest in those races, even at times of Valence and Nice. Although there were more spectators back then, they still weren't there in the same numbers as around the Koppenberg. There's a reason that in Belgium is named the start of the real cyclocross season. So, if we look at the races that took place early in the season, we see that many are not there anymore. I remember we had this race in Neerpelt, Gieten. Those races aren't there anymore. Kruijbeke is there, Molenbeek is there. Kind of the Brico Cross, Exact Cross, the way that was founded, that was kind of a thing for, let's bundle the strength of these races, get sponsors together, let's help strengthen our position. And now we're seeing that many of those races organize Belgian championships. They have a taste of the real deal, like Lokeren, and then they want more. And that's the trend we've seen. The smaller races, Gieten, Neerpelt, etc. have been replaced. We're going to richer cities now, like Herentals, and they don't want to organize early for a couple of thousand people out of love for the sport. They want the big names, they want the big money, and they want to be in the Christmas period or around the Christmas period. We've seen a trend in recent years that Christmas period becomes increasingly busy, and personally I do think it's worrying that races like Lokeren also want to be there. I can get it purely from a financial perspective, but if you look at a balance from the sport, it's tricky, and I don't want to get into an all too long discussion about this now, but Ele Iserbyt gave an interview this week to Wielerflits, and he said, well, I'm worried the World Cup is taking up half of November, full of December and January, and the exposure for the rest of the season will go down due to that. First of all, it's funny that he talks about the international exposure going down, and that's bad for his sponsors, because Mette Penningen has repeatedly said that his sponsors don't give a damn about the races outside of Belgium. At the same time, I do see from Iserbyt's perspective how it's frustrating that the season is becoming shorter and shorter. He's not a type of rider that can do well on the road. Even in the gravel races, he's not doing all too well. He's a pure cyclocross rider, so for him, obviously it's better if that season is long because there's more attention and more money for him. I do think that there should be a way forward for full-time cyclocross riders. And here's what I don't want to get into a too long discussion about now. Maybe we can do it later in a different podcast. But what is the position of cyclocross? Cyclocross needs to find a place for itself, a right to exist for itself in a changing landscape. The riders doing cyclocross are more combining it. They're combining it more with road, with mountain bike, with other disciplines. At the same time, gravel is a discipline which is relatively new in Europe. There's not much money in it, but still for bike brands, it's important to have a presence there. Gravel Worlds, we can hear Trek say, well, we want to have, Balwaza Trek wants to have a couple of riders starting Gravel Worlds this year. It's difficult for cyclocross to find a place in all of that, and only the future will be able to tell what exactly that place will be. But the Belgian races might not be there, but that doesn't mean that cross waits, because the USCX series is in September, and we know for sure that there's going to be racing going on in Germany and in Netherlands in September as well. So I don't know, is it just the televised part that moved away, or is it a premature warning flag that this is going to happen in other countries as well?
I feel the second, and even if and it doesn't really mean maybe that the races are not going to be organized, but it just probably means that the majority of the relevant cyclocross riders are not going to be there. With relevant, I mean, you know, the pros, the athletes, really. So that could be a trend that we will see in the next coming seasons. But again, that's maybe a little bit too early to tell, because we don't know if Vlaams Classics is going to hold on to what they're doing at the moment in the UCI with the calendar and the way they're organizing it at the moment, and the ruling on that as well. So we don't know, but I feel that could definitely be the case. And yeah, then the worrying part is that you might actually kill something that was somewhat beneficial for the riders, and when you want it back, you're not going to be able to do so because the money is just simply not there. And that is for me a bit the worrying part. I mean, we have said it before that there are plenty of Belgian races, and I guess maybe a little too much, but it is, at the end of it, it's also, at the moment, the most money for the riders is in Belgium, and we have to find a balance in a way to make sure that the riders can make a living out of it, but we also have to grow the sport, and we have to find a way to find a balance between the two, and not to go too much into that and go more into the USCX series. I think that for them, the placement in the calendar is not too great, I would say. It's probably good for the American riders, because then they maybe have a little bit more time to then focus on getting to Europe and do the races in Belgium and Belgium, Netherlands, and maybe a trip to Italy and maybe a trip to Ireland and call it the World Cup. But overall, I feel that the USCX series is definitely a series that is not going to benefit from the current situation. And I am also wondering how many European riders will actually go to the US and do the races there also. It would really surprise me if we were going to see in both categories from the elites maybe 5-4 that will go and try to get some points in the back. It's going to be interesting to see how that will play out also.
I'll come back to the USCX series in a bit. First, I do think that the September and also October races outside of Belgium will continue to exist. The mentality is different there. I feel in Belgium there's always a bigger business model needed, bigger events, there's always a bigger financial story in the back of their mind. I'm not saying they don't have love for the cross, the organizers there, especially races like Ardooy do organize out of love of the sport. But the non-Belgian ones, the budgets there are smaller. It's always turning every euro inside out 3 times if possible to make the event happen. And I think that different mentality will mean that they will continue to exist, whereas the others won't. And you could also see last year that when in Belgium there were no September races, really the full-time cross riders like Annick van Alphen went to Germany to race. They raced in Düsseldorf, they raced in Brumat, they did their races elsewhere. And I would like to come back to a point of last week's discussion when we talked about the World Cup calendar. I had a couple of people asking, well, why are you so negative about Belgium? I'm sorry if it came across that way, because that was not my intention. What I wanted to say, because the question was, why are you so focused about growth? I think it's good that we have the races in Belgium. Isn't it good to see that there's so many spectators in Belgium? Absolutely, it's really good to see, and we should not turn our backs to Belgium. We should flourish the races that are there. But I also think that the World Cup should be focused on expanding the sport, because for the future of the sport, if it wants to grow, have a place on the calendar, have a right to exist, if you will, you can't only be focused on Belgium. The Belgian races with big spectators, there can be a few in the World Cup, but I don't think it should be half. They have the Exact Cross Series, they have the Super Prestige, they have the X2O Trophy, all other places where they can organize races. I think the World Cup should be focused on growing the sport to attract foreign investments so the sport can grow in the future. We've been over Waterloo. I said last week I can understand why we should go. I can understand why we don't go. I also said that I heard they would be continuing, and they sent a press release out this week, and they will be becoming the title sponsor of the USCX Series. They will be hosting the final weekend of the USCX Series. I think that's an improvement. I like their course a lot more than the Really Rad course. Not that Really Rad is a bad event, but not really a fan of that course there. At the same time, then, Issam, your point, what about the foreign riders? Will they attract Europeans? Probably not as many. Bastans is retired. You really need the adventurous riders. There's always a couple coming over, but I think that's unfortunately their destiny. It's pretty expensive. Yes, the C1 races do earn you a nice sum of points, but at the same time, will it be that significantly more than if you go to Germany or maybe to France? Probably not. So it's hard to see, even geographically, and I don't think this moves the needle. But, I study economic geography, so this always interests me. It doesn't really make sense because we're going from Roanoke to Rochester and then to Baltimore. Geographically, it would make more sense to do Roanoke, Baltimore, Rochester, or Rochester, Baltimore, Roanoke. Somebody in the Instagram comment said they couldn't do that because Roanoke can't go that late due to them not being able to organize during college football season because there's not enough hotel rooms available. I don't really know the full extent of that. I mean, I do know that it's easier to say, it should just be in this order and there's more complications with venues and stuff. But I would be interested if there's a reason behind that, if somebody could let me know, because I am intrigued by that. But again, it wouldn't really move the needle, and it's hard to see because you already have Balwaza Trek Lions saying, well, maybe we'll still send a few riders, but we also want to be present at the Gravel World Championships. So it will be interesting to see, Issam. You chop off the crown, the World Cup, so there's no real incentive. I'll be there for the World Cup already, just do X, Y, Z. It will be interesting to see how that develops the series, but I do know, Issam, we're going to be there. We're going to be talking about the USCX Series in September. No Belgian races, we don't care. We'll tune into the USCX Series, put the feet on the sofa, have a nice drink, have maybe a snack with it in the evening. Nice looking at a couple of riders, having a couple of different talking angles, warming up our voice again for the podcast season to start about the Belgian season. It should be really great.
Absolutely. You caught me off guard there with we will be there. But yeah, of course. I mean, the racing there is obviously going to be broadcasted and we will be able to follow it. And I guess that we will be at that point very eager to talk about cyclocross. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how the racing will develop there, and hopefully we will have some some good racing. It's as long as it's a bit close and we have a fight for for the victory. That's probably the most important thing, and that would also be great for the viewership overall. So let's hope for some great racing, and I'm looking forward to the racing there, because it kind of gets you in the mood of cyclocross, and then from there we jump from race to race, and eventually, before you know it, we're already in December and having the 6,000 races after each other, and then you're tired of cyclocross, and then when we end up in the Worlds, you're already kind of happy that the season is almost over, but then you still have a couple of races, and that's how you summarize the season in a couple of sentences. But it's going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should definitely be fun. I hope that the USCX series succeed in its current format. And the final point there, you said, well, the placement is maybe a bit weird, but you should remember that the way the American seasons work, the domestic seasons, is very different than how we know it here in Europe, because of the size of the country, the climate, and everything. It just works different. Their cross season spans from September till the first week of December. Only a very select number of riders make it across to Europe for a Christmas block and the World Championships block. For most of the riders, it's December, and then it's arrivederci. We prepare for the road season, which starts late January, early February there. That's a complete different story than what we have here in Europe, where, well, you can start your cross season in October, sometimes November, you race until January, maybe February, and then you do road. It just works different, which is also why their placement is different. It's also conflicting, because if you peak early in September for your domestic series, it can influence your ability to peak for the European campaign later. It's extra tricky for them to plan their season, but yeah, that's worth factoring in. Finally, to end this episode, just a news fact. Trek has announced it's not continuing its name sponsorship of the Balwaza Trek Lions. Their contract expires at the end of this year. Sven Nys will be hunting down a new title sponsor. Trek will remain on board as bike sponsor and therefore also remain on the kit, but that should mean we are getting a new jersey. I'm seeing that the Paul Sauze Bingle team is also selling a lot of its clothing, so hopefully we also get a new jersey there, especially considering the fact that Bingle at some point is going to need to be replaced on that jersey. So that should be something small to look forward to as well. Issam, thank you so much for being here. A short hour of talking between my thesis writing, my research proposal for my thesis, definitely did me some good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good luck with that, and thank you for having me. And I hope the listeners got through it well and were able to get some order in the chaos that we had at certain points. But it was great to be talking.
Hey, I certainly enjoy talking about this a bit more than writing about coal and innovation and patents and crowdfunding and all this type of stuff in West Virginia. So it's definitely nice to be out there and just talk about cyclocross road racing. It's such a great sport. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back at some point. Maybe we talk about the state of cyclocross, or probably we're going to be back in 2 weeks after the European Mountain Bike Championships when Puk Pieters gives us something new to talk about. Thanks for listening and see you guys then. Goodbye.